I'm Kayla Dice, and this is Your Life Path. In this special edition of the podcast, I welcome back Laurie O'Connell to talk about his game Full Send, currently on Kickstarter at the time of release. We recorded this episode on the Thursday before a convention, having just travelled 4 hours from London to Edinburgh. We didn't always stay on topic, so there's some bits that I've cut out to make the episode more focused, but because they were either interesting or funny, I've included them at the end of the episode, after the outro, so stick around for that if you want to hear the offcuts. Also, we forget to actually plug the other project we're working on together at the end of the episode. It's called Mech Ridder. It's a modular system and sandbox setting for Mouse Ridder that turns it into a game of urban mouse and machine roleplay. It'll be part of Mouse Ridder Month and features art by Gustavo Filetto. I've included a link to the pre-launch page in the description, along with all of the details for Full Send. With that said, let's get back to the episode. Welcome back to This Is Your Life Path. I am Kayla, and I have with me today a first time ever returning guest, Laurie O'Connell.
Hi Kayla, how are you? Long time no see.
Long time no see. Well, it's been over 2 years since the first episode we recorded. One of the early questions I had on this, because of the fact that Laurie is a returning guest, you can listen to that first episode. I think it's episode 3 of the first season. It's a really good one. I still get people tell me today about how much they liked that episode. How have you been since that episode?
I've actually been quite well. Obviously, I have produced a bunch of new stuff. Some new people have come into my life, which has been very nice. I've met someone. And yeah, I've improved as a writer and as a human being, so that's nice.
That's great. Yeah, we should probably just talk about this. If you listen back to that first episode in the pause and you were like, damn, these two's chemistry is instantly off the chart.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if listening to the episode that was necessarily could have been predicted.
No.
But maybe. I'd like to say we fell in love on a podcast.
That is your line about our Meet Cute as a podcast.
Yeah, I was telling this to someone the other day who was like a teenager, who was like, oh, how did you meet your partner? And I was like, oh, we actually met on a podcast. And they like laughed in my face. And then they were like, oh, that is actually adorable. And I was just like, okay, you're 18, so...
I think it's a thing where when you think about it, it's cute. But, like, I guess if someone doesn't know who your girlfriend is, they maybe do immediately have the image of podcaster partner. Okay, really got to reorientate everything I know about Laurie. But no, when you were on the show last time, you were in the middle of developing To Honor and Obey. And then after that, you released Death Game. You released a demo version of Town Air Makes Free, which was something you did with Lester Garrett. Yeah, Lester Garrett. Dead Earth Collective is I believe their name. And now you are currently kickstarting for Full Send. So with this, would you like to go straight into telling the audience about Full Send?
Oh yeah, that would be a good start. So we don't have to have a whole lot of just unbearable banter. Yeah, that'd be nice.
I think it's charming.
Yeah, it's true. Well, I've got some more saved up. The Kickstarter I'm doing at the moment, which is why we're recording this from Airbnb in Scotland on our way to Tabletop Scotland.
First returning guest, first guest. I have had the record happen on a bed.
Yeah, true. We're doing a new RPG at the moment. It's a tarot-based one, which is fun. Obviously, I did To Honor and Obey. That was tarot-based. This one is also tarot-based, and Kayla's designed all the cards for it. So, it looks cool. But yeah, it's about mountain climbers, and it's about, like, that genre of adventure documentary where people go kind of exploring, or they go to try and make a first ascent, or those books that you read about horrible disasters that happen on mountains. It's kind of like that, really trying to get into the lives of climbers and why they're risking their lives in this way, but also the kind of like technical difficulties and the sort of geographical beauty of mountain climbing. So yeah, it's really fun. It's very tactical as well. It's probably the most, I say, crunchy RPG I've ever designed by a long way.
I think, having read the vast majority of your work, I'd probably agree with that assessment. I do know what you mean about like the sort of adventure / disaster docudrama sometimes, and I feel that genre almost has its own crossovers with like plane crash investigations and other kind of like disaster reading or stuff. Like, what did you have any specific? I mean, actually, I guess I have sort of two questions that follow on from this. So actually, I'll start with the first and then go back to media influences, which is like, where did your interest in just the topic of mountaineering begin?
I mean, did your parents ever take you up mountains as a kid?
No. No, I think that's a quite obvious difference. We went up hills. We went down hills more often, really. They weren't even like just steep things in a forest sometimes, but that was the most we did.
We always used to go on family holidays to Ireland, and we used to always be forced to climb a mountain. Well, now my parents aren't like as physically capable of climbing really big mountains anymore. But I remember me and my little brother were the two most unfit cousins, so we just absolutely hated it. And we would always complain, and of course it would always rain. And I remember one time we were going up this peak, I don't remember what it's called, one of the 12 bends in the west of Ireland, and we took a wrong turn. And then we ended up on, I think it must have been about 10 or 12. We ended up, and I don't think I've told you this story before.
No. Live on the pod.
We ended up on this, like, pretty much a cliff face. But we were kind of halfway up. And one thing you have to know about everyone that is genetically related to me through my mother's side is that we're incapable of admitting a mistake until we're way too late. Which I like to say, we commit. And so in the guidebook, it was like, oh, it'll be a sharp scramble. And then we were like hanging off this cliff. And like, I mean, for me, obviously I was smaller, so I probably thought that the fall was like bigger than it was. But I was like, oh my God, we're going to die. Anyway, so we made it up. But then I don't know, from that point on, it's just been like an interest that I've had. Because yeah, mountains are so cool, and obviously that's barely a mountain. Like, it's just about a mountain, not a hill.
I don't believe I've ever been on a mountain. Is Arthur Seat a mountain, or is it still a hill?
I don't know.
Or is it just some kind of level? That's the closest.
I think Arthur Seat is still a hill, but
yeah,
that I could be wrong.
Big ass hill.
Yeah, it's a big hill,
and it's where we're recording from. Well, not exactly, but I have so you found like this topic always very interesting.
Yeah, and then obviously why humans as a whole, I think we've always been interested in this, because the kind of adventure explorer thing has always been like this genre. Like, you know, think about all of those like old-timey like videos of like people going off on like exploration expeditions and then doing a whole bunch of interviews with the media and the silly voices, you know. And then obviously you have had this like quest to summit Everest and so many people dying in the attempt. But then recently, I think with the invasion of influences into that space, it's become almost like even more like toxic and macho in many ways, even though a lot of climbers I do know and they're lovely people. But the way that kind of like brand sponsorships work, it's now so competitive. And there's also, you know, when you have these big mountains, there's this like adventure tourism that goes on, which is even more dangerous. And yeah, it just makes the whole thing actually very like tense and dangerous and competitive in a way that I think is very interesting fodder for an RPG. And then obviously the whole world caught up to this fascination with climbers doing insanely crazy and terrifying things when Free Solo came out, and then everyone watched that as well.
Yeah, that was another question I had relating to, I guess, documentaries. What were specific ones you went to, either as favourites you have that you're aware had an influence on you, or things you may have done specifically for research? So you've just mentioned Free Solo. A central mechanic in the game is named after Touching the Void. I wondered, any other things that will almost go to. So there's some listed in the demo which I worked on, but
I love Touching the Void, and actually the writer Joe Simpson, who was the person that survived this accident in Touching the Void, it has written a lot of books, and they're very good, and he's got excellent climbing principles. Like, he's really interested in exposing like the dark side of like the climbing industry, if you like. I think there's a book called Dark Shadows Falling. That's fantastic. There's another book called Into Thin Air, which isn't by him, it's by someone else, but that's also fantastic. It's about like a disaster that happened on Mount Everest, and it's very disputed. There's a big argument about what actually happened. And in terms of documentaries, I have a favourite documentary. It's called Torn. It's on Disney Plus. I told you about this documentary.
You've told me about Torn.
Have you watched it yet?
I've not watched it yet, actually. I've not actually seen many climbing documentaries. I know the Touching the Void story via listening to it recapped from a comedy podcast, but
I would say watching Torn is probably what made me want to write this RPG.
yeah, I think you told me about Torn and then a few days later told me about the RPG you were working on.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Do you want to sum up Torn and why? Like, I think in a way it kind of unlocked a lot of the like psychological drama at the heart of the game for you.
Yeah. So there's this and I forget what his name is, but he was a really, really famous climber and mountaineer. And he's actually, I'm forgetting his name now because I'm under pressure, but he's actually showed up, like, he showed up a lot. Like, he's a very important figure in, like, American climbing. And he has a sidekick, and he has a whole family, right? This documentary is a documentary that's made by his son several years after his death, and is about the aftermath of his father's death and what kind of like happens to the family. So his dad and his dad's mate went on a North Face sponsored expedition to go and climb this mountain, and as they were skiing down a section of it, there was an avalanche, and the one guy died. The other guy, the sidekick, survived. Now, what I think is absolutely fascinating about this documentary is that the sidekick then went home, married the guy's wife, and adopted all of his children. And like within 6 months.
That is so fast.
And the son is like really trying to. It starts out as like, oh, why was my dad like so obsessed with the mountains and he was never with us? And then that becomes this kind of like trauma bond type justification for like having this other guy come and kind of like replace the dad wholesale by being like, at least he's, you know, here. And it's absolutely screwed up. It's a fascinating insight into a documentary where the director has no idea what he's actually documenting.
I do enjoy documentaries where it's like with essentially a compromised narrative figurehead.
Yeah. I was just thinking, like, holy shit, these people's lives are so messy. And, like, of course, you have this, like, difficulty of balancing family life with a hobby which takes you away for a lot of time and potentially takes you away forever. But then, yeah, there's also, of course, as with everything, there's a lot of personal drama, and especially when you get to that kind of, like, macho layer of, like, climbing influencers who, especially I think it's more, like, there are more people coming through now who necessarily didn't come through in that exact culture, but there did used to be this very macho culture, I think, and still is in a lot of places. Of course, you're going to get this very strange series of personal conflicts and journeys happening, which they're just amazing. They're documentary worthy, they're drama worthy, and I think if it's drama worthy, it's RPG worthy.
Yeah, this sounds like a very interesting game. I mean, I have read the game, I've really enjoyed the game, and obviously now I've worked on it for the cards and doing like some demo stuff. But also, yeah, I think it takes a premise that people might just be aware of. There are people who climb mountains, and through game mechanics really explore so many different facets of that. I had one question before I move on from like the general influence just that came to me in the podcast, because you said the guidebook that was either misleading or that people read incorrectly used the phrase a short, sharp scramble.
Yeah.
Are you aware of the fact you use that in one of the prompts in the game?
Yeah. I think that phrase might be burned into my memory.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's always stayed with me. And I also remember because when we were going up, there were some like blueberries growing out of the side of the mountain. My auntie was like picking them and eating them, and I was like having a panic attack because I'm also scared of heights.
I forget this about you.
Yeah.
Because I feel it's not something that as affects you now as an adult.
Yeah, because what I'm afraid of is not heights, really. It's like the idea that a tall building could fall down whilst I'm in it, or like I could fall for a floor or fall off a railing or something. Basically, it's not tall things in general, it's the fallibility of man. It's like the human error inherent in a tall building.
What are you afraid of? The weakness of the human spirit, probably?
Yeah, but of course I felt that in that moment, so I was like, well, I could just fall off.
Yeah, you're making it so hard for me to not ask a question that I feel isn't actually nice to ask on this podcast, even to anyone, but I thought would be interesting, which is what's your relationship with your parents? But no, it's actually, I wanted to maybe shift track to talking about tarot now. The game uses tarot as its central mechanic. It uses the major arcana for obstacles and then uses the minor for action resolution. And, I wanted to ask about what does using tarot allow you to do, and how does having tarot in mind as your play utensil influence how you approach the game as a whole?
I think it's elegant when you only need one thing to play a game. And tarot is good because it's one thing, but it's basically two things.
Yeah.
Because you have the major arcana deck and the minor arcana deck. So that's one very sort of boring benefit of tarot.
That is why I've done games of playing cards, prefer to resolve everything mechanically with playing cards, even if the mechanism is different within numbers or stuff.
Tarot is good because, well, when it comes to procedural generation, I don't know, some people are really big fans of rollable tables. I play in person, and I think that's why I'm not a big fan of rollable tables, because when you're playing in like a slightly dark room and you roll like 3d6s, and you have to like then look at this tiny table, and they're always so tiny, the font on tables is always so small, and you're like squinting, and you're like, okay, what is happening here, to try and procedurally generate something. You just don't want to do it.
You play in person, specifically you also play in person in public.
Yes.
Which I do think, really changes your willingness to skim through a book in a big way.
But I do like tarot cards because they've got a picture on them, which is really good.
I like when there's lots of words. Where's my pictures?
Yeah, exactly. But also, like, there's something about the physical act of flipping a card. And then you see it, and then you find the prompt. And yeah, you're still, like, looking for a prompt out of a number of prompts. But I think it's easier, and it's more streamlined, and it's more kind of, like, evocative and dramatic. And it feels less like you're, like, putting a pause on play to, like, go looking in a notebook. So that's why I've always and I've done loads of tarot cards that have prompts. Witch of the Westmoreland, that game uses tarot to generate prompts. And then the second half of the question is why you use it for the other mechanic.
Also, like, I guess how does approaching the idea of, because like you said, you prefer to have, one set of utensils being all that you need, that feels more elegant. So how does having made the decision to do that, and to do that with tarot specifically, then inform the rest of your process? Because I presume, like, I remember having a conversation with Chloe on Game Soup, where she said about, like, drawing cards off of the top of a deck as opposed to rolling dice, which is how Witch of the Westmoreland works, but is not how this game works, and is how games I've written work, but not all the ones I've written. I'm saying something like, I think I maybe, like, helped, like, sum it up as, like, it's the fact that whatever card is revealed off the top was always that card, regardless of whoever took an action, whereas a dice roll, normally, it's different every time. I guess, yeah, just, like, card play in general, and then specifically the tarot brings with it opportunities and limitations, and I was curious how you navigated those.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different resolution mechanics that use cards. You're right. You're describing one from Witch of the Westmoreland where you basically just draw cards out of a deck, and that's us. And technically, if your game lasts for ages, you can still kind of count cards that way, but it's not really. It's still relatively random with the way that the game is set up. But also with card games, you have the ability for, more complicated games where you actually plan anything that you have a hand of cards and then you play from your hand. That has a tactical element, right? And it has an element of, you can plan ahead and you can kind of work out strategies of when do I want to put this down? Do I want to get rid of this card? Do I want to trade this card for that card? And so on. And so it's more, I suppose, technical, and I think that's interesting in a climbing game, because one of the things about role-playing climbing is that actually when you're climbing a mountain, there are long sections where no one talks to each other and is just busy focused on their own thing. And I was like, okay, well, actually a card game kind of works for that. Obviously, in the role-playing game, things are relatively streamlined. You're not going to talk to each other for an hour whilst you simulate climbing a steep wall face, right? Because that would be pretty boring. But you can imagine that moment of thinking, what cards am I going to play here, as that sort of quiet pause. So it's more technical. It has that slightly more cerebral element to it than just rolling a dice in front of the table.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting difference where, like, obviously when you imagine more tactical, like, skirmish style games with dice, the idea is more on, like, an expansive amount of abilities, whereas with card play it becomes much more about your individual actions and choices in a given moment with just the basic resolution.
Yeah, and Full Send is like it's like a hack of bridge, basically. It's like a trick-taking game where you play from your hand and you're trying to score points, right? So in a way, it's also just an attempt to make an RPG that my dad might want to play, I suppose.
Yeah,
that's
and
his
this,
favourite game.
Once again, in terms of trying to have me not ask about a guest's relationship with their parents, you have said how this game inspired by family memories and card games you used to play a lot with your family.
Well, I mean, my dad always backs my Kickstarters. Shout out, Dad. And to be honest, I put in the most expensive tier of my Kickstarters basically just for him every time, because I know he's going to pay for it. And he never plays them. I don't even think he knows what an RPG is. So I just thought, you know what, I might as well just integrate in a card game. And then at least he can play that.
Yeah. My mum and sister backed Psycho Dungeon. I don't believe anyone in my family backed Transgender Deathmatch Legend.
Wow. Loaded.
I think some family members should have backed it at high tiers as way of apology. And I, on this podcast, am choosing not to mention who that is.
If my auntie wants to apologise for her poor map reading when I was 12,
well, I mean, based on what you've told me,
money.
Based on what you've told me about all of your relatives via your mother's side, I don't think she does want to apologise ever.
Yeah, it's the classic Boris Johnson program, never complain, never explain. Oh no, that's the royal family, that's not Boris Johnson, never mind.
This does get me onto in a route while sidestepping this diversion, which was because you just mentioned how it's you mentioned how it's a trick-taking game. And I wondered, like, what was the appeal of trick-taking games? I also had this tag question of, like, what's your relationship with card games? You've talked about having played, like, bridge a lot as a kid here, but the approach to tick-taking rather than doing the kind of drawing a random card or something else?
I just wanted something that was a bit competitive. I wanted something that was a bit competitive, but also had an element of like, this is the contradiction you're playing with in the like mountain climbing phase, because there's a mountain climbing phase of the game and then there's a downtime phase of the game, both of which are kind of strategically complicated, but in different levels. Like, if you think about it as like the mission versus the base management.
A bad downtime session just results in your life getting worse gradually and slowly, whereas a bad mountain time is
very bad mountain time.
It's threatening your life immediately.
The contradiction with the mountain time that I'm trying to play with is the fact that people ultimately want to be the one that gets the kind of like glory. They want to be the one that gets to name the mountain if they do a first ascent. They want to be, the one that gets the interview with National Geographic or the North Face sponsorship or Red Bull or whatever. However, ultimately, like, if one person gets seriously hurt or killed, that affects everyone. And no one wants that. And mechanically, it's not very beneficial either, by the way, in the game. So you're kind of playing with that contradiction of trying to make sure everyone achieves a base level of success, but you achieve more success. And I think a trick-taking game is a good way to do that, because in a way, everyone at the table kind of controls the outcome of the trick, right? Everyone puts a little bit in, and you can even, there's nothing in the game that actually bans talking about the cards you're going to play. So if you're in a really tight spot and you think someone's in a really dangerous position, there are certain classes that provide benefits to others if they win the trick. So you could negotiate to have a specific person win the trick, but also there is an element of everyone wants to take that trick, and there's a lot of like sneakiness and maneuvering, and ultimately you can play higher cards at the last minute, or you can lie.
If you go with a sort of open talking and you are telling someone, because of your mechanic here, it's actually beneficial if I let you win this trick, so you can play this low card and I'm not going to try and beat that. And then it's like, you have just lied because actually for XYZ reasons you wanted it in this moment. That's...
And like with the best games, I think there's a way. I think the best games are a way to play them as like full role-playing games, where you basically just decide what you want the role-play to look like, and then you play cards to match. But there's also, some people can just play it as like a really crunchy card game with a role-playing element. Like there's a spectrum of play styles that you can involve in that card game, and I like that about it.
Yeah, what I really liked when I did like Transgender Deathmatch Legend was kind of like the way the flow of like a drawn card of hands could influence your character so much, where if you just get this spread straight away of like, I have a lot of low cards, but I've played an intimidating character in like the introductory scene, so I'm full of shit in this fight. That's the whole thing. I'm bluffing and I'm getting exposed. And it's a similar... I think trick-taking accomplishes that quite nicely. A hand accomplishes that because you have a sense of what actions you're going to be... You're capable of. Like, a hand kind of tells you these are things you're capable of in the same way like abilities or moves in a PBTA game work.
Yeah, exactly. There's a certain... you can look at it and think, I already know how this is going to go for me, to a certain extent. But then also there's the randomness of the generation of the mountains themselves. You don't know. I mean, if you've picked to climb a difficult peak, then you have more cards to beat, but you don't know which cards are going to come up. If you get 1, 2, 3, 4 on the Arcana, Major Arcana, then your score to beat is so low. You'll be fine, even if you have the worst hand in the world. You may not actually win the trick compared to everyone else, but,
That is a useful segue onto the Major Arcana, because, as you said, like, tarot cards, specifically the majors, as prompts, I don't know if I could trace where I first saw that. It feels like it's been around for a bit.
Royal Blood.
You took after Royal Blood. I feel I had seen it in a different thing first, but not a thing I can remember. But
Anamnesis also did it quite early on.
Yeah, even so, I mean, more what I mean is I feel like there probably could be a precursor of this in the mid-2000s.
Oh, there almost certainly is.
Yeah, that's where I'm just like, that's quite... But I do find the way the summit building works here an interesting evolution of just using cards as prompts. Would you want to explain that and how the system works, and then I can ask more questions about it?
Yeah.
I know how it works, but it feels weird if I just do the explanation.
So, to build a summit, you decide how difficult it is. So, you know, climbing Matterhorn, for example, is quite tall. It's a cool looking mountain. It's actually much more straightforward than, like, it's pretty much on the easy end of big mountains, right? Compared to somewhere like K2 or Annapurna, where it's just, like, incredibly deadly. And then you introduce a number of cards, a number of obstacles to match the difficulty. And you turn them over one by one, so they're face down. You turn them over. And each tarot card represents both a specific event. So, for example, you might need to cross a crevasse, or you might need to, I suppose, deal with a storm or an avalanche, or you might need to scale a steep cliff. Find a shortcut. Yeah, events like sort of that happen on the mountain, role-playing prompts, basically. But they also have a mechanical implication because the number on the major arcana also reflects the difficulty. So if you draw something like the World, which is like number 22.
Yes. Mm-hmm. No, it's 21 because full is 0.
21, yeah. That is an extremely difficult card to beat. You have to play a combination of very high cards from your hand, which you might not have. If you draw like the Magician,
3.
Yeah, that's a low card. You'll be fine.
Having done all the majors, there are a lot there in my mind now.
You'll be fine. You don't need to play that high card. So it's a mechanical benefit. It's a mechanical obstacle, the number on the major arcana, and then it's also leading into a prompt. Now, obviously, that presents a design challenge, right? Because major arcana cards, they do have a meaning, an implied meaning.
Yeah, this was the thing I was curious about, because when I have written major arcana as prompts, I often do think about the meaning of the card a little, even if sometimes I segue it. Like for Caught in the Remix, I have the High Priestess just be a woman who's offering you drugs, but which is just a shitty pun, really. But like, I still do think about it. I was curious, do you think about it a lot with the meaning, or are you more coming from the other side?
I do think about the meaning, and I try and respect that in what I'm writing, but it might be changed or different. So, like, for example, cards that represent choices, very easy, right? Cards that represent risks or like sudden catastrophes or changes, those are very easy. Things like the Tower, right? Extremely easy to write a prompt for the Tower. It's just very, very straightforward.
Do you feel weird about the Tower being not that hard to beat, though?
No.
Fair.
Because I do want to put in a more difficult... I have some more difficult prompts that kind of do the same thing as the Tower, but they're more extreme. But if you think about something like the Star, I think that's the best example, because it's a high number. So it should be a really hard obstacle. But the meaning of the card is almost overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah.
So what do you do with that? And in that case, I've actually made some of the higher cards kind of optional cards where there are challenges, but there are also very big benefits to taking them on, mechanically speaking. That's something I changed since the demo came out. So when you take on certain challenges, like the one in the Star, you are taking a risk. You choose to play against them. You can just get a bye. If you choose to play, you get double points. So it's like, it's an opportunity card more than a risk, more than an obstacle card.
To, I guess, the mindset of the climbers, risk is opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. And it's because the Star is about kind of like creativity and so on. I thought it made sense to have it be a bit more open-ended. But yeah, that was one of the more difficult ones to interpret.
And I think like the way the combination of like the prompts, that creating the mountain, the fact that you're shuffling these, but in a game people are taking multiple mountain trips. Like, it kind of gives a lot of like almost video game kind of procedural generation, with the fact that you might see prompts again, but in very different, or cards again, but in very different contexts that have transformed them.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a similar way to, I guess, how one-shot games work, but it feels more impactful here when it's linked to numerical difficulty.
Yeah, thank you. I think the mechanics work. I think it's fun to have these two different sides, the tarot card, the meaning, and the number. And also, if you're going to put numbers on a card, you should use them for something. I don't know, I feel like if there's a number written on a card, the number has to mean something. Chekhov's number.
I don't agree with that, but in the same way, I think it's fine that you don't use the suits for anything, right?
Yeah, well, I'm actually kind of joking.
I don't know, you have I could see that being cohesive with your thought of using all of the Ox when it comes to tarot cards.
Oh yeah, I do have that thought. Yeah.
But
I want to make the suits mean something. I have some modifications. Basically, there's different play modes for the mountains, so that if you just really want to play like a crunchy card game, I'm gonna use the suits to add in trumps.
Yeah.
And also add in certain other things that I'm not going to go into now, but to make the game more card gamier. But that does cut across. I've stripped back some of that so that the role-playing game is still the thing that flows through the book rather than the card game. But I'm going to put in an optional modification for people that like to play a crunchy card game, because war games and board games and RPGs interact all the time, and people do war gamey RPGs. Why not do a card gamey RPG?
Yeah.
You know?
That was also a thing I found interesting about like advertising card game things. This actually related me to another question though that I forgot about and moved on from, because when we were talking about cards and all of the tactical things of cards, I guess I do wonder what attracts you to tarot over playing cards. Is it just that they're prettier?
Yes.
Okay.
Bigger deck.
Bigger deck, yeah. Sometimes good, sometimes good, bad.
Also, mechanically speaking, they have an extra face card, which balances the game a little bit better, because the numbers of the obstacles can get so high. Face cards, having higher numbers in the game, they have a higher score. Basically, having an extra one is very statistically significant.
Yeah.
Compared to a standard deck of cards.
Yeah, I think when I've designed with playing cards versus tarot cards, the addition of an extra face card is pretty massive, even beyond whatever you're deciding to do with the minors or majors. That was just a thought I had where I was like, is it mainly the pretty pictures?
Yes. Yeah, it is.
This, speaking of pretty pictures, and this will read like fishing, but there is more question you can be asking here, because I wanted to ask about like the visual identity of the game, what you wanted that to convey to an audience, and I guess how the visual art informed the game's development.
So I picked up a lot of like books about climbing, and a lot of them are hardback, just because they're kind of old-timey books, and I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to do that. But one of the things, because it's a smaller game, it's on the smaller side, but one of the things that I really like about climbing books is, and actually a lot of non-fiction, is when you have all of the text and then you have the photo pages, and then as you're reading and then you get the photo pages and you're like, oh, this is such a treat, and then you go and read, and I don't know, I think it's better than getting all the photos throughout. Maybe that's weird, but for me, I prefer it.
It's unique.
And so I was like, okay, well, there's no point. This is a game set in the real world. There's no point in doing a whole bunch of painting bollocks and drawings and all of that. You know, it should be photography, and there's so much fantastic climbing photography out there. So I licensed a few photos just to get some really nice ones that I like from a climbing photographer who I've been following for a while. And of course there's a lot of like royalty free climbing photography out there as well. which is fantastic for the game. And it's kind of like, it's very much found media, right? It's like designed to look like a climbing book. And that's also why I asked you to do the cards, because you do amazing stuff with Photoshop. You're really good at it. And you start photo bashing all this stuff together for the cards. The identity of the cards is a bit more, it's like mixing that photography aesthetic I've got in the book with the tarot aesthetic of, like, you base a lot on the Rider-Waite deck. So it's a really interesting bridge between those two things, which, given that I gave you absolutely no direction whatsoever and just let you do whatever you wanted, probably for the best, because that wasn't necessarily like, I didn't really have a vision for what I wanted the tarot cards to look like, but you provided that.
Yeah, I think I remember, because why, this will also sound more like fishing, but what was it, why you wanted to ask me to do the cards, beyond the fact that we know each other and I could?
Because you're really good on Photoshop, and you know a lot about photos.
Thank you.
And you have a really good eye for, like, pulling stuff out, mixing them together, and I guess it comes from your background in the editing film maybe a little bit as well. But that was the kind of stuff that I was looking for, right? I wasn't looking for someone that was gonna, like, draw a bunch of stuff or whatever.
Yeah, like, the book as a whole has a feel that is, it has a verisimilitude to it, which is strengthened by using photography throughout, and then ultimately, while there's not like a verisimilitude towards my work, the fact that it still builds off a lot of photography as art makes sense. I think, when you asked me about it, I then sent you back almost references to a couple of other things I'd done where I was almost like, do you want it to be more Psycho Dungeon or more Out of the Fold or this? And then I think eventually you were like, I think after a while you were like, I'd like a mix of these things or whatever, in terms of just like, I want there to be a mix of colours, people and equipment and stuff, but said go wild. So I guess I kind of, figured the idea of like, well, this is separate, it's not in the book, so it is.
Yeah, it doesn't, it needs to be its own thing.
Yeah.
And
while also having a relationship to the
book, like, of course, and it does, and we'll figure out, tie-ins with the layout of the book as well, probably, because you're also maybe going to do some of that as well.
Yeah, I'll do some of that.
Yes, as I asked you on the train up here.
I'd already agreed off mic, this isn't just an ambush. I should clarify to the audience.
So there'll be, like, tie-ins there as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, like a speaking the same language even if saying different things.
Yeah.
Or saying the same thing in different languages. Maybe that's a better metaphor.
Yeah.
I have a way with words as well as images.
I still don't know what verisimilitude is, by the way.
Oh, that's like, it was a term in early film theory. Well, that's how I came across it. I think it's also sometimes used on stage. We're saying it's effect, like naturalistic would be a much less obnoxious way to have stated that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going for. Nice. I was like nodding along like, yeah, I'm sure what she's saying is right.
Naturalism was the way better word there. Where it's like, like, yeah, in films there's almost considered an early divide between like realists and formalists. Which I think is often the most sort of obvious divide that I guess can play out in early in an early art form's development. So I actually wanted to go back to, like I said, we did all of the stuff about the life path general questions in our first episode. And we've skirted around some other things here in the same way. But
Who
also,
are you? Where did you come from? Will you marry me? Those ones.
I don't ask all the guests that. Just the special ones. I don't think I'd do the asking.
Well, yeah, true.
I expanded some of these questions afterwards, so I did actually want to ask you one of the ones that I thought was a very interesting question I added afterwards, which is, do you remember the first time you considered yourself a writer?
Ooh. Well, I won loads of writing prizes, like for creative writing in school. Then I wrote like an epic poem that was shit. That was interesting.
How old are you writing shit epic poetry?
Don't ask. And I always was like, oh, one day I'll publish books, because I just always like to write. But then I thought I would maybe be a novelist. But then obviously that didn't happen yet.
Yeah, it's still quite young.
Yeah, true. But yeah, and then obviously getting into archaeology, that all kind of took a backseat, and then the job that I do now, obviously I do a lot of editing and article writing and things, but nothing that is like a writer. But RPGs are that for me. More so, I don't consider myself to be a designer. I prefer a writer.
Which is interesting, making the switch while then doing a game that is probably the biggest, like you said, mechanical, crunchy game you've done.
But
you wrote all of it, obviously. That still applies. I was just saying it was interesting.
Writing anything is a technical as well as an artistic task. Think about, and also there's not that much of a division between the two. I mean, I don't think writing in iambic pentameter is really that creative a lot of the time.
No, that's true. I guess you may be more than some other people I know. I think you have a tendency to self-impose guardrails as you write, which probably does make a distinction between technical writing and not feel this. I know from a lot of your freelance work, you'll write it in iambic pentameter or in verse or something else.
That's because for freelance, by the way, I am available for hire as a freelance writer, and I am very good value for money, because when I get a freelance gig, they're always oh, it's 15p a word, or it's 20p a word, but it's only 400 words, and I'm like, well, it's only 6,000 words or whatever it is. And I think that I want to give someone, if someone's given me a really low word count, I want to give them the best value for money possible. How do you do that? You do it in verse, right? Because per word, you're showing off more technical skill and creativity. So, if you ever hire someone to do freelance writing on your Kickstarter and they don't write a poem, they're actually slacking, and you should probably dock their pay. And then hire me.
They're just angling for other people's jobs. And I'm moving on to the last question I have, so I could get us out of this. I think this has been an interesting episode. I think there is probably more interesting things we could talk about. I do genuinely want to know, I think, a lot more about what you do think about when I guess you talk about technical writing, how that interacts with I think that's something you have clearly thought a lot about in a way that I've not. But we are running nearly we're running. This is a shorter episode because of the recap, but also this is the first episode where I have a hard out of dinner plans.
Yeah, that's true. Also, I will say this thing about technical writing, just quickly, I think what it is that to write good rules is not actually really a technical task. It's a task of understanding what is at the heart, what is at the essence of the genre or the process or the kind of storyline that you're trying to emulate, which is not the same thing as the aesthetic of the storyline. The aesthetic of D&D is fucking elves and so on.
Fucking elves.
Fucking elves. But the essence of, I guess, what drives D&D is the power fantasy, right? So maybe to write mechanics, you have to get to the heart of that. To write good mechanics, you have to get to the heart of that, which is a task of analysis. So, thinking about Death Game, right? You could have games that have the aesthetic of Squid Game. Games like Deathmatch Island do an amazing job of emulating the kind of aesthetic and the vibe of the Death Game media. But I would contend that they don't really get to the heart of why people are interested in it, which is the competitive edge. It's the fact that it's really all a critique of capitalism and how it turns us against each other. It's the kind of the grind that you're constantly trying to break out of, that drive to kind of play with and push the boundaries of it. And so you have to develop mechanics that actually allow people to do that. So that, I think, is actually a writing job, not a designing job, if that makes sense.
What do you consider design to be separate from writing? Or are you like design isn't a thing?
If I say that, am I going to get in trouble? You're going to have to bleep this out as well.
I don't think you have to bleep that one out. I mean, it's a take you can make if you're just like, it's all... Because I mean, this is an interesting thing just on the nature of writing and what you consider. Because I used to piss off someone I used to date by, when I was a stand-up, I said at the time that I wasn't a writer. And they often push back on this, being like, but you do hour-long shows, you have written those shows. And I would go, but I didn't write them. I did not sit down with a pen and paper at any point. I made some bullet point notes and then visualized the show in my head and then did that. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, that process was not writing. Basically, so that's what I'm saying. I feel like if you were just making the perspective of it's all writing, design is just thinking about something, and that's anyone can do that. That would be an interesting take. This is me asking partly to understand what you mean.
Well, for me, design is more about arrangement. Like, if you... Like, because there is an element of game design that is about arranging different elements that you already have. I don't know. Again, like, so people call themselves game designers. I think what they mean is, I make games. I don't think design is really a relevant verb actually in that.
No, I think if I was being completely speculative, I'd guess TTRPG designer picked up a lot because game designer is more, and game developer are more of jobs that are hired for from video games.
I think that's it.
I remember speaking of, because you'd already mentioned Dead Earth Collective. I think
it's Dying Earth Collective. It's not dead yet.
Oh, right. It's in motion. I got the tense wrong.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I was on a panel at a symposium for them, I looked through all of the other guests and I thought it was really funny how clearly everyone had just been asked to label themselves. And so because of that, it meant it was like TTRPG creator, TTRPG writer, TTRPG designer, right? Like, there is a thing of there's just not like a sort of understood.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I do a lot of like other production stuff for my games as well. So in that case, creator or designer would be better. But that's not what I like to do. I like to write. Yeah,
I remember when I was a film student, the advice I was given on projects where you did loads of stuff was like, well, give yourself the credits you want to do.
Yeah.
So like I've never given myself an editing credit for my own work, even which I have edited. Partly because that feels weird to do, but also it's because I don't have an interest in being an editor. But I always give myself a layout credit because I like layout and I care about that. Whereas I imagine for other people who just do their layout just to get it out of the way and because they don't have money, they probably don't care about giving themselves that credit.
All I'm saying is that I'm not saying that designer is not a valid term. All I'm saying is with the Deathmatch Island example, which I really like Deathmatch Island in many ways. But what I'm saying is, even if you only write mechanics, if your task is to seek what makes people want to play this game, what makes people interested in this genre, and then how can I do that with a mechanic, that's a creative task. So you're justified in calling yourself a writer. And I would say the same thing, by the way, for board games. I think you can call yourself a board game writer if you want.
Yeah, this is what I wanted to narrow down for my understanding was like, is this you viewing how you view the term writer or how, and I think it's about, at least, yeah, that makes sense to me. Would you argue that the stand-up comedian who only writes bullet points and then visualizes a show in her head has written it? She performs it as well. Yeah,
I would say it depends, like, I think it's a creative task, right?
Yeah.
You can call that creative task whatever you want. But it is, you could call yourself a stand-up designer if you wanted. You're
I mean, I don't think that would be very accurate, though, to call myself a stand-up anything. Since last season, I got in a wheelchair. That's the context for that joke. Okay. That was an interesting sort of thing. I'm going to get to the last one is the wrap-up question that I flipped to. What is the biggest lesson you think you have learned from creating RPGs?
Perfect is not the enemy of good. You can do better. If you think you've got a half-good RPG, do a first edition, but then go back to it, because you'll be able to improve it.
Oh yeah, finishing is great, but also you can always redo stuff.
Yeah, exactly. You just I think what I'm still in that stage of my writing where I'm improving. Every single thing I write is better than the last thing I write, and I even think the first stuff that I wrote was pretty good. So I have a flex, by the way. This is an update. I'm either now an adamantine or a mithril bestseller on DM's Guild until it's updated. I don't know when this podcast goes up, if it will have updated yet. There's only 180 adamantine titles on the site, by the way.
I've got the #1 result when you search transgender on itch.
That's me.
No, I have it on itch, you have it on IPR.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, Lidgecraft comes up if you search transgender on IPR. My games come up first if you search transgender on itch.
Yeah. But I only have one thing on DM's Guild, and it's that. And that was quite early, I put that out. Obviously, it was actually a collaboration project with a bunch of other writers, but my adventure was first.
So your last advice is, like, you can be improving, you can always be improving.
Yeah, and don't think that you just need to get stuff out and then call it done just because you're producing products that you can sell. Because ultimately, like, that actually is extremely corrosive to your perception of the art form. Games are not a product. Game books are a product, you can sell that, but the game fundamentally has to be good for it to be worth anything at all.
Okay, well, thank you for coming on the show. This is going out, and you can still find the Full Send Kickstarter at kickstarter.com/full-send. There'll be a proper link in the episode.
Yeah, I think my name's in the link too somewhere. Laurie O'Connell /kickstarter.com/Laurie O'Connell.
It feels like the snappy Kickstarter things feel like they should be more elegant than they are. That they're...
Yeah.
Also, in November, you and I are making something together.
Are you excited to do another episode of this podcast in November? But this time I interview you.
How do you think you could keep focused to interview me?
Of course, I could always concentrate on you.
Ah, well...
On the questions, maybe not, but...
Bye!
And I'm also talking about Mothership, which the Mothership box, the second edition of Mothership is, if the Mothership people ever listen to this podcast hitting the big time, make your fonts bigger, make your tables bigger. Why have you got a D100 table where the font is like the size of half an ant? I can't read that.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't usually, like, stuff text in anything I'm doing, to some extent, meaning I have, like, kind of gratuitous spreads just because I'm like, whole thing needs a section break, which is... I'm aware there's a different preference there, and some people clearly love a stuffed page. That is clearly to a preference of someone. I just find they wash off me, but also I have dyslexia, so...
If you have a D100 table for patches in your game, a D100 table for patches that you've crammed onto a single page, but you haven't written cohesive combat rules. Mothership, sort it out. Anyway, that was just a little message.
That was a little aside. It has nothing to do with tarot or full send, really.
But that's why I don't really like rollable tables as a method of procedural generation. This is one for all the RPG bloggers out here. If you're describing what's good in an RPG, but you're just describing what you like or what you've written in your own RPGs, then it's not very interesting or useful. Thank you.
You're just trying to use my podcast to settle all your scores now.
Yes. And it's not that what you have to say isn't interesting, but it's just that the blog is not really meaningful criticism. That's the difference. Like, it might be interesting, but it's not good critique. You just said something that it's like good things are good, bad things are bad. But it's just your subjective opinion. Anyway, that's all.
I think about, like, how some people really dislike a sort of quantum mystery effect, and some people love that. And then I feel every time
the Brindlewood Bay.
Yeah, the thing of, like, discovering the mystery, like, solving the mystery by proposing a theory and passing that because there's not an answer, versus there is an answer and a GM having to dispense clues. Like, those just clearly are stylistic, like, massive stylistic and formal differences, but I feel every now and then I see one described as more worthy than another, which feels less useful as criticism. I'm so excited for the call-out blog that comes out of this podcast. It's going to be great.
Who have I antagonised so far? The mothership people? No, that's valid.
Are you giving me a whole list so I can't cut any of it? Is that how this plays out now?
Valid criticism of mothership. Something about bloggers.
I feel there's a middle one.
The people.
No, that was the last one after the bloggers arguing that it was interesting but not critique. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. The blogger line, it's more you were saying interesting but not critique, which I think is often true and more accepted sometimes. The line, I think that's just going to make people angry. But
oh, you can cut that out then.
It's up to you. But now we also now need to
we can leave this bit in.
Okay, and I'll just bleep who else, and we can guess. And because of the phrasing, people are going to think it's a minority group.
That's fine.
It's not.
I mean,
but
a minority group, technically.
I'm going to say no, it's not. And now people are wondering with me, who does Kayla think isn't? It's not like that. I'm moving on.